So today we've got the UFO Yowie connection, or the possibility of it, and I think there is one. Where, you know, Australia is such a big country and we've got so many unusual animals. I think that there is a lot that, and you'll see I'll flash up a map later of the American anthropoids, cryptids, call them what you like, and we've got lots here too, and I've posted a lot of information about that on the Strange Encounters Down Under Facebook page too. And I've got some news clippings that I've had previously posted I'll show here too. But, let's go here. Ooh, what's going on here? Go away. So, you know, this is the Yowie statue in Kilcoy, and it struck me when I was looking at this. Who's seen this? A few of you been up there to see it? Yeah, it's pretty underwhelming apparently when you see it in real life. I haven't seen it. But, you know, if there's one strange thing that Australian people know about is the Yowie. And they generally believe it's, you know, Aboriginal mythology, it's not real, etc., etc. But there's very compelling evidence that something is living in our bush. And because of the way of the geography of Australia, I think it's very easy for animals of these sorts of descriptions to actually hide themselves away, and they're probably pretty good at it. I've often wondered, you know, if Yowies existed, why we haven't seen dead bodies, dug up bones, those sorts of things. We find evidence of them in the environment with the footprints and hairs that get caught on fences or on trees, etc. But I don't think anyone, at least in Australia, has ever found a dead body, which is really interesting. Which makes me wonder, well, where do they go? You know, where do they go? But we'll get into that. So, how many people here are members of UFO Research Queensland? Okay, so a couple. So, in the last issue of the journal, I published a handful of cases of what was called the UFO Anthropoid Catalogue, which was published by the Australian Centre for UFO Studies back in 1980, and it referred to, out of that, I pulled out the some of those and as examples, and it was in 1975 at a place. Now this is around the Goolma area, and this is Newcastle here, but around Wellington, Guree, up around here, in Goolma, etc., there was a spate of UFO sightings and Yowie sightings as well at the same time, which is really interesting. So I thought I'd just quickly go over those, give you an idea. Now this is 75, remember, but you know, it just continues today. So, and I couldn't find anywhere where, I'm going to show you some maps later of UFO sightings and Bigfoot sightings. There's a map of them in various localities. And I couldn't find anything like that in Australia, but there's, if you go on one of the Google maps, it'll come up with all the UFO sightings, and there's heaps of them in Australia, but I couldn't find anything like that with Yowies. So, unless there's one on the Australian Yowie research site, I don't really think.
I haven't seen it, no.
No.
Not a whole map.
No. Anyway, you'll see when I do it, but I just wanted to quickly run through some of these, give you as examples. Come on in. Come in. Hello, come on in. So this is just over a very short period from, 22nd of May to the 12th of June, so 3 weeks. And on the 22nd of May at 10 p.m, there were 3 witnesses who sighted a disc-shaped object which zigzagged in the sky for approximately half an hour, as if looking for something. And over the next 3 weeks there were reports of an ape-like creature, cattle and sheepdog mutilations, and a further UFO report. Then 2 days later, on the 24th, a farmer sighted a hairy gorilla-type animal lurching across a paddock, and another farmer sighted 15-inch and 6-inch footprints. And then the next day, on the 25th of May, cattle with broken necks were discovered, and a 19-year-old girl sighted an ape-like monster in the headlights of a car for 5 seconds. The next day, on the 26th, a man sighted an ape-like creature walk out of a thicket of trees. Upon sighting the man, it turned and ran back to the thicket, and a housewife watching television saw a hairy, large face peering into a large window 7 feet from the ground. And then on the 3rd of June, a couple sighted a hairy monster while driving. 7th of June at 10 p.m, 2 teenage girls heard a strange grunting from outside their farmhouse. And on the 12th of June at 9:35 p.m, several people sighted a silver-white disc-shaped object settle in the Goulma area. And other sightings were reported from Wellington, Guri and Gugong. So that was just like a mini flap, I guess you'd call it, where people were reporting in a short time frame in one particular area, seeing UFOs and Yowies. And I guess that's the first hint that, you know, there could be a connection between the two. So, and I've just pulled out some of the more interesting older accounts that I've came across on Trove. I don't know if any of you ever use Trove. It's great for digging up old articles. Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of information available there. But of course you can't look up Yowies. It's just like hairy men or monsters, or, you know, because going back in the 30s and in 1910 or something like that, they just didn't call them that, like they didn't call them UFOs either back then. So this was the weird beast in the bush, and this is from 1932 from the Sydney Sun. A mysterious animal said to be 7 feet high with a large round hairy beard and 4 tusks is being searched for in the district around Myrtleford, Mount Buffalo. Mr. William Nuttall of Myrtleford states that he was attacked by the creature, which stands up like a human being. And on Thursday night, when he dismounted from his horse to adjust his saddle gear, and the creature rushed up, snarling, and tore his shirt to ribbons. Got it? It then chased him to the... Yes, everyone turn your mobile phones off.
Sorry.
It then chased him to the railway line where a wire fence checked it, and Mr. Nuttall's horse took fright and galloped away. And the animal was said to resemble an ape, had been seen by other people, and a large party was hunting for it, as you do, apparently. And they still do over in the States. They have conferences there where they talk about the right guns to use and things like that, to go out and shoot them, to hunt them.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. Some of the things that I've been watching lately on about Bigfoot conferences, it's disgusting. But anyway, I mean, if you can just stay away from, sure, protect yourself if you feel threatened, but don't go out and hunt them, for goodness sake.
They shoot first.
Yeah.
Ask questions later.
True.
Be down around Kentucky, I'm sure, you know.
Did you find out what gun to use?
No, I didn't pay attention to that.
My first guess would be a big one.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
If they use tranquilizer guns, it'd make a lot more sense, don't you think?
Yes,
It'd be much
absolutely.
more valuable alive than dead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, duh.
Yeah, what are they
You
thinking?
won't get a passport into America.
Oh, gosh. So this one goes back to, this is the Monaro hairy man, if some of you have heard of that. This goes back to 1912, right, from Darling Downs Gazette, so not far from us. And it says, for many years past, the people around Bombala, this is in southern New South Wales, I've got it wrong, have claimed possession of a hairy man. Bushmen at various times have reported they'd seen an immense ape-like animal, but it had always managed to escape them. So someone reported that one ran into a thick bush on his property and he discovered the tracks of an apparently immense animal, etc., etc. What else have we got here? The next one is, this is very interesting. This is from, where are we? Oh, have I lost it already? Repeats Monaro's hairy man. This is a historical hairy man report from 1909, and it's an excerpt from a book called Hairy Man Again. And this happened at Maitland Bar at, two youths named Summerfield and Lou were among the hills lopping currajong for cattle. They heard a peculiar noise, and looking upwards they saw what they described as a hairy man sitting on a rock staring at them. Taking fright, they ran and were pursued by the stranger. In his efforts to escape, Lou fell into the river, being nearly drowned before Summerfield rescued him, etc., etc. And they carried on their flight towards home. Someone who heard them crying out came out to help give them assistance. The strange man still approached with a lumbering gait, and that was Mrs. Albert Brennan, that's right, who came out to help. She ran into the house, closed and barred the door. The stranger followed and, reaching the door, scratched and fumbled about for a considerable time and then slowly retreated towards the hills. And she claimed that she confirmed the boy's statements regarding his appearance, saying that the stranger had long black hair. And I find that's really interesting that some of them actually have long hair and some don't. So there must be, I mean, I don't know why. I haven't heard anyone actually explain their theories about why that would be so, you know. Maybe there are various species or subspecies within that species. I can't really tell. Of course, in Queensland, particularly up around Cardwell, we have the short hairy men too, as well as the Yowies. So and I think some of those are black. So yeah, but anyway, there's just these reports going back ages. This is from People magazine. This is the one saying that legendary man beasts eat desert aborigines, apparently.
Oh dear.
So okay, that's fair enough. And we've got this one though, mystery killings in South Queensland. This is 1969, where someone's written in and says, your article on the terrifying monster man recalls 2 mysterious killings on a small farm, almost on the border of New South Wales and Queensland, overshadowed by Lamington Plateau, now a national park. And one night the frightened bellowing of our house cow caused Bluey, our fearless cattle dog, to tear off into the darkness, barking furiously. The dog attacked something but suddenly let out a terrible scream, and then all was silent. My father and uncle with lanterns and guns found the corner fences down, the cow dead with a broken neck, its head almost torn off, and the dog crushed against a tree where he had been thrown. And in the distance they could hear something crashing through the bush up the mountainside. A thorough search the next day failed to explain what had killed the animals. So that was from Broadway in Queensland. Someone had written in. So I've read various thoughts about the what would you say, the ferocity of Yowies. Some are actually quite aggressive, and I believe, and Ray Doherty, I did an interview with him, and he was saying that the further out in the bush that you are and you see them, the more aggressive they'll be because they're not used to seeing people. The closer to cities where people see them, they're not aggressive like that because they're just grown up around human beings, but they know to stay away, basically. So, so this was a particular, an interesting one, though. I'm not exactly sure where Broadway is. Does anyone know where Broadway is? This person wrote in from that. Anyway. So there's a wide degree of reports of Yowie behaviour, put it that way. And I have read that some people say that they're carnivorous, others say that they're herbivorous. Hello, come on in. Come on in. So again, I guess there's varying types out there, Now this one is really interesting. This was sent in to Claire Noble, who was a UFO researcher up in Queensland, and she's now passed on. And so when she died, she sent her records, or her family sent them down to us, and I was going through them, and I posted a lot of the articles that Claire had collected over the years onto our Strange Encounters Down Under Facebook page. Now this one's interesting because it shows that there's a Bigfoot in a rock. Okay, so that's quite ancient, and Claire actually happened to have the original photo, which you won't see anywhere. So, and you can see the size of it. The foot comes down to here, goes up to here, you know, and we've got a ruler there. So that, I thought that was fascinating, that something so ancient was, you know, impressed into the rock. Now here's another one that was sent to Claire. Now this was someone in southwest Queensland sent it in. Looks like a footprint with 6 toes in rock. 21 inches long. Okay, there was no date on the photograph, so we don't know, you know, when they took the photograph. It doesn't matter. Obviously, it's quite old. The actual print, or whatever it is quite old. It looks like sandstone, is it? Something like that. Yeah. 6 toes. So, could there be something else out there besides Yowies? Could there have been a different type of, you know, a subspecies that branched off and evolved into a certain
The
way?
coneheads allegedly had 6 toes and 6 fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah, the giants evolved.
Yep.
Yes.
Who knows? Yeah. Yeah. So you know, when people talk about our Australian Aboriginal people, it's now proper to call them First Nations people. But I think there were beings here way before the Aboriginal people. Way before. Okay. So, are Yowies more than an undiscovered species? Well, I think that they are. And when I first started putting this presentation together, I was a little bit more sceptical than I am now, I have to say, because I always start off sceptically. But when they started talking about that they're seen in conjunction with mysterious balls of light, I thought that was very interesting, because people who have close encounters often have encounters with mysterious balls of light. And I've interviewed many people who've, particularly little blue lights, right? They'll come and they'll be around the people. That happened to a witness who was driving, and all these little blue lights appeared around her. Another woman was standing in the water down near Redcliffe, and these little blue lights came through the water, and they came to her and sort of went around her and up her lower legs. I've heard many stories to do with lights. They avoid camera traps, which is interesting too. It's really hard to get photos, and a lot of people have put out camera traps to actually capture Yowies, but with not a lot of success. They disappear in an instant, which is interesting too. People can be, you know, tracking them, seeing them, and then poof, they're just gone, you know, boom, like that. They can appear to be semi-transparent, which is interesting to some people. And I remember Mariana Flynn, I think it was Mariana, who since passed away, but she was running the Sydney UFO group. And she and a few other people were out walking on a track in the Blue Mountains, I think it was. Do you remember, Barry, that story? I think it was the Blue Mountains or somewhere around.
South of the Blue Mountains.
Yeah, and they were, one of them saw a Yowie, and then there was this shimmering sort of effect in front of them, like mirage haze, and then boom, it's gone. Just completely disappeared from view. What was that? Telepathic communication, which is really interesting. There are so many. And I'll play a clip later, but there's a guy who's a researcher and Bigfoot researcher in the States, and he's collected over 400 accounts of UFOs and Yowie simultaneous encounters. And he said, and I've heard this from other researchers I was listening to, around 17% of those involve some sort of telepathic communication, which I think I've got that right, which is interesting. They can appear to bilocate, or they can be in front of people and then suddenly, within a second, they're behind them. Like, how does that happen? Instant disappearance or cloaking. Tracking leads to nowhere. The tracks disappear in mid-stride. Tracks end at sheer rock walls. Well, where do they go? If you can't go that way, where do you go? Come to a sheer rock wall and you're gone. I mean, I'd be saying the same thing about people, you know, who perhaps are following a UFO and then boom, suddenly their tracks are gone. And I remember years ago, there was a case where someone had driven a car out into the desert in central Queensland, and the car was gone, the tracks were there. Where the heck did the car go? The only place it could go is up. The only place. If they are animals, there should not be any paranormal activity associated with the sightings. If they are just some sort of, missing link animal, there shouldn't be any paranormal effects around them. Also in the States, I watched something last night. We watched on Netflix, there's a series called Unsolved Mysteries. It's the new version of Unsolved Mysteries. And in volume 3, number 6 I think it is, it's the episode's called Paranormal Rangers, and it talks about Navajo Rangers in the States, and they did get hair samples, and they sent them off to have the DNA checked, and it came back with just unknown. There's nothing in the database to identify it. Absolutely nothing. That's interesting. Shimmer in a portal before vanishing, which is what I was saying before about Mariana. These are the North American cryptids. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the Australian version. I'm surprised no one's done one actually. But you would have heard of a lot of these. And I've just put this up to show you that there are a lot of types of cryptids that people are seeing and experiencing, encountering, but they won't be recognised by mainstream scientists at all. And of course we've got the skinwalker here, and over here somewhere's the Mothman, here the Jersey Devil, which you've probably heard about, the Wendigo, which the Native Americans talk about, Sasquatch of course. Chupacabra comes into the whole UFO close encounter experiences as well. So in Brazil in particular. So interesting, but the scientists just don't want to know. You just don't want to know because it blows a hole in their theories, I think. And I'm not saying that all of them are correct, and I'm no anthropologist or anything. Have no science background, but when you get a lot of these stories collected over time, it becomes compelling, that something's going on. And that was what you would think scientists would say, hey, what is this? What's going on? Biologists in particular. So here's a map that I came across showing major clusters of paranormal activity, and actually it's just UFO and Yowie sightings. So the red ones are UFO sightings, and maybe the people down the back can't see clearly. The green ones are the Yowie sightings. I can't remember who created this map, but over here, where are we? Over here there seems to be a cluster, so I blew it up. And this is Kentucky, which I was mentioned before. Well, they want to go and shoot them all. But if you blow it up, in that cluster you can see the UFO reports and the Yowie reports in the same location, compared to not many around here. Because you've got to wonder then, well, why do they go? Why is that happening there? It's the same as why do crop circles appear where they appear, Could be geopathic stress, it could be fissures under the ground. If you're trying to look for a logical explanation, or it could be, and someone this week put me on to someone in Melbourne, maybe I can get him to zoom in for one of our meetings next year, who talks about geopathic stress creating paranormal activity, which is interesting in itself. So that's the Daniel Boone Forest in Kentucky, and this one here, this orange one, is a Dogman report as well. We'll get into that a bit later. Here's another map which is a bit more comprehensive. Now the red ones are new sightings reported after 2020. And in the break at 2 o'clock I'll put this map up and you can come and have a closer look. The orangey ones are reported in the last 7 days. The green ones reported in the last 48 hours. The blue ones in the last 10 days. That's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah, put together by the Bigfoot Mapping Project. Okay.
Is that of Bigfoot or is that of UFOs?
That's both.
Oh.
That's both, yeah.
What year was that shown?
Oh, sorry, this is Bigfoot Mapping Project. Now, this is current. You go
It's
onto the
current.
website, yeah.
Okay.
It's
So it
current.
keeps changing
Yeah.
every day.
I guess so, every day, yeah. I haven't checked since then, but yeah. So it was current. Sorry, I got that wrong. It was not to do with UFOs and Bigfoot. That's just Bigfoot. But just to show you the amount of cases, because it's got a huge population over in the States, doesn't it? So, you know. And if you go back, you're looking at certain locations. So I'm guessing not a lot of people are here in, you know, Las Vegas, Nevada. It's got desert and, you know, so you're looking at where people tend to cluster themselves. So you've got to have people who are going to report them so you know about them, right? But there could be other reasons why they're in certain places. So that's just the Bigfoot sightings there. So I expect if they have, I don't think I've got it, no. I expect if they have a UFO map they could overlay, you'd probably see, you know, similar happening in that area. And I guess that shows the prevalence, doesn't it, of these beings, these reports of beings, I should say. Everyone's going, I can see the ticking over. Okay, so this is a really interesting encounter too. There was a dairy farmer named William Bosak from Wisconsin, and he was returning from a co-op meeting. This is in 1974. I didn't pull out any current ones because I'm looking for ones with images, so because it makes it a bit more interesting. But he was driving home when he nearly slammed into a globular UFO on the road in front of him, and its bottom half was enshrouded in fog. But inside the visible transparent dome was a 6-foot-tall ape-like creature with reddish-brown fur covering its body except for the face, and distinctive pointed ears, and it appeared to be operating a control panel. And as Bosak passed by, the object suddenly arose and disappeared. So this is one encounter showing that there's something strange in a UFO, not an alien as we would expect to see, as we've heard all these many years of a little grey and, you know, inverted pear-shaped head and big dark eyes and all this sort of stuff. Or tall whites or whatever it is. We've got this hairy being. Very interesting. And that prompts my memory. I do like to get my memory prompted. But years ago, because I've got a lot of stuff in here that I've never written down, but years ago there was a gentleman who was in northern New South Wales. He was coming up to a T-section on the highway, and this is some years ago in the 90s, where it wasn't as busy traffic as it is now. And he said, I'm going to tell you something, and you are not going to believe it. He said, but I saw this being in a car, and it was hairy, and it had large ears. Now, I can't remember whether he said it was a passenger. It probably was a passenger. But he said, I looked at it and I was gobsmacked. I could not believe what I was seeing. Because the first thing I thought was, is it Halloween? You know, we didn't sort of celebrate Halloween here in those days. Was someone going to a fancy dress party? But he swore black and blue that this thing looked real because he was close to it. But who knows? But it was just such an interesting story. So that was that case. Okay, so some witnesses assert that when they try to take photographs or collect other direct evidence of the Bigfoot sighting, the creatures use a kind of hypnosis on them to prevent them from acting, and I find that's really interesting. I've read a few stories like that. Other people talk about receiving detailed psychic messages as well, which is interesting. We'll get into that in a bit. And those messages, much like the close encounter reports that people have with ETs, are ecological and spiritual messages, which to me, ecological, I can understand. The whole idea of, you know, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yeti, Yowies being sending messages to humans, that's taken me a bit to get my head around. But the more that I've actually listened to people's experiences, listened to speakers at conferences, etc., I'm starting to think, maybe there's something in this. And there was, that's right, I was communicating with Susie Hansen this morning over in New Zealand, who some of you know is a alien contactee. I said to her, Susie, was it you who was telling me that you had a Bigfoot experience over in the States? She said, no, I was staying with someone who had a Bigfoot encounter. But she said, I received this telepathic message, but I can't remember what she said about it, but she said, a strong sense of being communicated with. She said the next day I had this horrible migraine, and the person she was staying with said that is very typical of what happens with people who have telepathic communication with Bigfoots. I've never heard of that. That's interesting. So, so very strange stuff going on around them. Other people have also talked about them changing shapes. Actually, Gary Opert, who's down in Mullumbimby, who is a biologist and a UFO researcher, etc., he talks about on YouTube somewhere about Yowie sightings that he's had and his daughter has had. I think his daughter's in her 30s. And not too far from where they live when they've been out walking. And I know Gary, and Gary's he's a scientist, a real scientist, and he's lived in New Guinea and he's studied unusual animals. And Gary is not a person to make that sort of stuff up. You know, he's written books. He has he's on the ABC radio every weekend talking about animals. I'm not sure biology or something or other. He's got a sort of standard he's got to keep to. He's not going to make that stuff up. I've known Gary for a very long time, about 30 years. Anyway, so this case, 1966, the CIA investigators simultaneous Bigfoot and UFO sightings, which is interesting. This is a place called Presque Isle State Park in Pennsylvania. There were 4 tourists from New York found their car stuck in the sand after spending the day relaxing on beach 6 of the peninsula. One member of the group, Gerald Labelle, was sent to call a tow truck while the others remained in the car. Around 10 p.m, police on patrol stopped to ask if they were all right. After being informed that help was on the way, the officers said they would check back within the hour. And when the police returned, about 35 minutes later, the group said it witnessed something weird going on up there, pointing to a location in the sky above a wooded area. So one of the group's members went to investigate along with 2 of the police officers. There were 2 women in the group, Betty and Anita. They remained in the car while they waited for everyone's return. One of the guys from the car and the officers walked roughly 300 yards up the beach before hearing the honking of their car's horn, hurrying back to see what happened. The women were clearly shaken. They said they witnessed a dull black shape, bigger than a man, big head and shoulders, arm-like appendages, no hands, no face visible, as though it had its back turned in front of the car, before it lumbered into the bushes. And then one of the women blew the horn. There was a scratching sound on the hood or roof of the car that was also reported. In the end, the creature was dismissed by investigators as a raccoon. Interesting. A raccoon, despite the women's very distinct description of a bipedal humanoid figure. But the UFO that they had seen was described as an angular craft emitting red and orange lights before descending down to the beach before it radiated a beam of white light that tracked something into the woods. There's another clue, tracked something into the woods. So it looks like that this Bigfoot ran off and this UFO is tracking them at it as it leaves. And then the UFO took off at incredible speed shortly after. So that's an interesting case. To this day, apparently, it's just no one knows what happened that night. So you've all heard about. Many of you would know John Keel, who wrote the Mothman Prophecies, and very well-known paranormal investigator, prominent ufologist as well. And he once proposed the idea that there are window areas on the planet where these things emerge from, throughout the world, and connecting our reality with parallel dimensions. And these dimensions have the potential to be populated with many life forms, and that could explain where some of these beings come from. I don't know. but it's something to investigate. Yeah, well, you know, being the contact for UFO reports here, of course, people particularly through the 90s, they would ring me and say, I don't know who else to report it to, but I think I've seen Yowies, you know, like, and there was one guy that was, he was driving down the Gold Coast from Brisbane in the late night or early hours of the morning, and before it was, you know, 4 lanes down, 4 lanes back. And he said down near Coomera, which was very heavily treed in those days, I don't know if it still is, and this big hairy guy just, you know, came out, ran across the road in front of him in the headlights, and didn't run, it loped. You know, like he said, it didn't have the normal running, it just loped across the highway. Yeah. Yeah. And disappeared on the other side into, I think there were a lot of pine trees around that area at the time. So who knows what's going on up in the Sunshine Coast, going up the Bruce Highway up to the Sunshine Coast with all the pine forests up there.
It's all chopped down now, houses.
So there's been so many reports of UFOs and Yowies being seen together. There are reports where there's a landed spaceship and there's Yowie standing outside like a sentinel, or sort of guarding the UFO spaceship. Let's call it a spaceship because that's what it is. And it's not a UAP. I'm not using that term. No UAPs in my head. It's all UFOs or spaceships. I'm sorry. I'm just not that woke. So, yeah, and can they act as, you know, guards or scouts for them? And what the heck are they doing around these landed spaceships? That person that I just quoted, Sunbow, he's written a series of books, and he claims to have telepathic communications with Sasquatch, right? And that they are a race of beings who, and he's actually had physical like face-to-face communications too, but obviously telepathically because they're not speaking English. But one of the things that one of the Sasquatch that he's in communication with is some being that calls itself Camus, and one of the messages that, this just to give you an example of the types of messages they get, says when your people will come to treat each other as equals and all life is important and sacred, they'll start to be ready to reconnect with other two-leggeds like my people and the Star Elders. Which, you know, to me sounds a bit New Age-ish, but I'm kind of sort of, you know, skepticism, I've got to keep it like this so I can actually critically analyse, you know, what's actually being presented. Because, you know, my brain just wants to go, no, you know. But I'm trying to keep an open mind here. Now this guy, Kawarni Lapseritis, he's also a guy that you just mentioned about healing. He claims to have been healed of cancer by a Sasquatch. So he saw a UFO. He pulls into his house, gets inside, gets into bed. Next thing you know, a Sasquatch appears. Comes in through locked doors, hears it though, but it's in a non-physical form. I mean, my head's going, wait, whoa, what? You know, like, how does that all work? But, you know, I've heard many stories like that when it comes to ETs. You know, kept coming in through locked doors. You know, there's a guy spoke at a conference in, oh God, years ago, who he was only 8 years old when abduction started to occur. And a big UFO came down in the backyard. ETs took him out through the big, thick, he said it was like, almost like a 6-inch bolted wooden door. It was that, you know, that big and that heavy. And he actually went through the door. So yeah, very strange, very interesting, but very strange. So Sasquatch is an alien avatar. I think that's very interesting because I've always said that aliens are master mental manipulators of human beings. They can compel people to suddenly stop watching television, get up and go outside so they can see a UFO up there. Or they can, you know, change their memories or make people do things they wouldn't ordinarily do. Those sorts of things. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some truth in that. Now, some of you who were coming to the UFO meetings at Kenmore, I think it was about 4 years ago, our editor Lee did a presentation on the Jules Rudd figurines. Does anyone remember that?
On the
Jules Rudd figurines. I don't know if you can see it from there. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, and the reason I've sort of thrown this in because we were talking before about, you know, the possibility of ETs genetically modifying Yowies, basically, or creating them, or that sort of thing. There's somehow some sort of genetics are being monitored. Shall I show this a bit? It's a bit bright.
Just a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Even
suddenly
Even I can't see. Oh, George of the Jungle.
Where's that machete?
Yeah.
You're pretty healthy, actually.
Okay. So, I don't need that anymore. And I was having a conversation with a few people in the break, and really we just don't know our history. You know, what we're told and taught is just, you know, archaeologists, anthropologists, historians' ideas of what happened, what came before. And so anyway, to get to the point, I guess, I'll get my brain in gear in a minute. This is a story about someone called, I think his name's Valdemar Jules Rudd. And he was visiting a Canberra in Mexico in 1945. And as he was walking along the street, he found some pottery. I thought, oh, this is interesting. He picked it up and had a look at it. And he saw another piece, he picked it up and he looked at that. And then when he started to sort of expand his view, he realised that the streets were just littered with broken pottery. And he thought that was very interesting. And so he became very interested because he was a collector himself. And he offered the locals $1 to bring in, if there was anything like that that they had found, to please bring it in, which they did. Over a period of time, they brought in 33,500 pieces of pottery, of figurines. And some of it was humans with dinosaurs. It was dated, and I can't remember what they used to date it, but it was valid, put it that way. And in amongst some of those, there were these monster-like creatures. And I remember, because years ago I did a Bible study, and some of the scriptures in there actually talked about creatures that had been created to be monstrous, basically. I can't remember for the life of me where it was in the Bible that I read. It was some obscure thing. Maybe it was in one of the apocryphal books. I can't remember. Anyway, so 33,500 pieces later, there's all these strange creatures that they brought in. Some of them, these look human. That looks human. But then we've got this thing, this squatty dog face looking thing. We've got this with the, I don't know what that is actually, but, this is, of course, looks like it. But there's another human looking form here. We've got this one over here, who's got 3 horns on the head. Very strange creatures indeed. Here's one with supposedly a human being riding a dinosaur. So initially, when the pieces were dated and given a thumbs up by archaeologists, they went, "Oh, that's fascinating, you've made this great discovery." But then when Jules Rudd showed those people, the mainstream academics, started to show them these figurines with people with dinosaurs, that was it. He was out and it was all a hoax. They changed their mind completely. It's a hoax, it's not real. Because it didn't fit in with the archaeological history. Okay, because humans apparently weren't around when dinosaurs were around. Well, I don't know exactly how they know that for sure, 100% sure, but that's what happened. So the collection is still kept by someone. Here's some more. You can't see it down the back probably, but this one's got these long slitty eyes. I don't even know what these are. They're very strange looking. Now, either these are a particular style, and I can't say that they are one style, that's for sure. Stylized versions of something that people have seen, or these are what people have seen.
Sure.
And then we get that.
They were about excavated 9 foot below the surface, and they estimated, I think, of my memory, is either 30 or 60,000 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Who was the guy who was in that video we saw recently who was saying that? What was his name? Can't remember at the moment. Who? No. There's a guy, he's got glasses, a beard and a mo, just can't think of his name. Anyway, doesn't really matter. So we've got this sort of stuff as well. No. If you've got your phone on you, I think I sent it to you. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And in these presentations, she pulled out more images of something that looked alien. And the ones that she pulled out, it was just one figurine, I think, that had the inverted pear shape, like a grey, basically, a grey alien. So that's interesting. Yeah. There's some very strange things on those petroglyphs. So, and then I sort of tripped over this one about in ancient Mesopotamia, they used to worship lizard-like beings as well.
Lizard-like beings.
Now, I know I'm getting away from the UFO Yowie connection, but I'm just sort of putting this in here to show you that, we just don't know our history, basically. So anything's possible, I think. So that was about 7,000 years ago. No, these were dug up from Ubad. Interesting looking, aren't they? Another one. This is in Japan. Lizard type being. And I know is it in China they worship Hanuman, which is an ape-like being. Very, very nice. I don't think I put an image of that in. No. Okay. Hanuman. Okay. And then I remembered Graham Hancock's book, Supernatural. Has anyone read that? That is a huge book. It's about 5 books in one. It's about that thick. Anyway, I got through it in a while. But in there he talks about therianthropes in rock art. And therianthropes are combinations of human and animal beings. Right. A bit like a centaur. Any Sagittarians here? Me too. That's a therianthrope, basically. And these are depicted with, human legs. No, I don't know, giraffe heads, I don't know what they are, but they look, whatever they look like. But long-necked animals with ears, but they're upright, they're bipedal. And there's more here in the sand rock art in Africa. This one's up on its hind legs, but with the horns, and I think this might even supposed to be a rhinoceros, but with human legs. This one, very long legs, but with, a steer's head, horse upright. All very strange. Some of the theories are that these are images that the shamans see in their journeys. Yes, that's possible. And others are that these are beings that, people actually saw. I don't know. But the whole point of it is the genetic manipulation and the experimentation, alien experimentation, that might have gone on this planet a long time ago. And considering that they've been able to successfully create a chimera of human and primate, which you saw before, then maybe it's, aliens with better knowledge, genetic knowledge, came here and did a few things here that were experimental, using humans or using beings like Yowies, right, and mixing their genes with other animals. It's possible. Here's another one. It's a deer, but human legs, human hind legs. Not a deer, stag, I mean. That's pretty famous, that one. And then we've got these lizard, reptilian-like beings here. Human heads, upper torso, but reptilian tails, basically. Got these others here, which are like an antelope head standing with sticks. I don't know. What is that? It's another one. Looks like it's having fun.
Look like a ballerina.
Tra-la-la.
Running a marathon.
These are really interesting. There's a horse on its hind legs. Looks like a dog on its hind leg. Dog man. All right. Dog man. Another one. Another one here.
You would know him.
Yeah. And the whole idea of shape-shifting in indigenous cultures, I mean, is shape-shifting in a non-physical form, or is it in a physical form, or is it just purely genetic alteration? I don't know. Just throwing it out there. Of course, we have the Lion Man found in Germany, 32,000 years old.
Lion man.
So what's a lion doing standing up on its hind legs like that?
Wow.
But it's an interesting piece, whatever it means. Very interesting. Now, I've told you this story before, some of you might have been here, but when I did my first shamanic training weekend, I took on my power animal was a deer, and when I was on the Saturday, and when I was driving back to the workshop on the Sunday, I could feel, my nose was cold and wet, and I could feel fur on my face while I'm driving, right?
Oh dear.
So it was like, I don't know where that came from, how it happened, and it was like an embodiment, I suppose, of the energy of that animal, but in a physical way that I could physically feel it. So I'm wondering if under other circumstances where it's not the 21st century and I'm not driving a car, out in the in the bush, and that reminds me of another story. But could we actually take on that physical form, physically? That form physically. I wonder. But I had this woman who came here once, way before I did my own shamanic training, and she said that she shape-shifted into this sort of grunting boar out in the bush, and she said she was aware of herself running along. She could sniff smell the dirt, and she was snorting, and she said I could actually physically feel it.
Okay.
It was like some sort of I don't want to even say spiritual, non-physical experience, but it manifested into physical qualities, put it that way. And how did that guy, that Kawani Lapsarot is what his name, how did that Sasquatch come in through into the house when everything was locked up? And even though he was non-physical, he felt him sit on the bed. He saw him sit on the bed, and the bed went boom boom. So I just heard that and I thought, wow, that's an interesting concept. But then I realised there's all these other things that might support it. UFO people might remember that case in Arkansas where there were those blue beings with like those horns, but they were sort of just on their heads, and they were sort of a bit monkey looking, like not looking, but body was monkey like, but they were blue and they had these strange things on their head, and they were sitting on the house. Do you remember that case? And they were trying to break in. God, I can't remember where that was. I've got a book over there that's got the images in it. But anyway, so that is basically ended that. But okay, everyone, thank you so much for coming.